For most of human history, people moved. They followed migrating herds across open grasslands, under endless skies, unbound by walls or seasons that could be owned. They gathered wild grains that ripened with the seasons, in quiet communion with the earth, taking only what was given, leaving no mark deeper than footprints. They adapted, constantly, carefully, to a world that never stood still, free in their impermanence, alive in the rhythm of pursuit and release. Then, beginning around 10,000 BC, in parts of the Fertile Crescent, something began to change. Some communities stayed longer in one place. The horizon no longer called them onward. The soil began to hold them. Wild grains were no longer just gathered. They were cultivated, coaxed and commanded into obedience. Animals were no longer only hunted. They were managed, fenced, bred, and broken to human will. It was not a single decision, not a sudden revolution. But over generations, movement gave way to settlement, and with it, a quiet grief for the lost horizon, traded for the promise of certainty. And in the flat, river-fed plains of southern Mesopotamia, that quiet shift reached an unprecedented scale. There, humanity experimented with something entirely new, a marvel of thousands beating as one heart, yet a cage of mud and ambition. Agriculture had spread across the Fertile Crescent, but in southern Mesopotamia, fertile soil and irrigation allowed harvests larger than most had ever known, swelling bellies and ambitions alike. With surplus grain came stability. With stability came population growth, and the first shadows of overcrowding where once there was only open space. Mud brick houses multiplied. Communities that once numbered in the hundreds reached into the thousands, pressing bodies closer, erasing the breathing room of the wild. And gradually, something remarkable happened. Not every person needed to farm. A liberation for some, a new dependence for others. Some shaped clay into vessels. Some worked stone and copper. Some organized storage and distribution. Some oversaw irrigation canals that stretched across the plains, like veins of control. Labor became specialized. Responsibilities became structured, and social differences, once subtle, hardened into walls between people who once shared the same fire. Hierarchy was not invented overnight. But in these growing settlements, it deepened, born not of cruelty alone, but of the sheer weight of numbers, and the need to command them. By around 3500 BCE, one settlement surpassed all others. Uruk, it was not simply large, it was unprecedented. A thunderclap of human possibility and peril. Its population reached 30 to 50,000 people, enormous for its time. A sea of faces where no one knew every name, every story. Temples dominated the skyline. Workshops clustered near administrative buildings. Districts formed as the city expanded outward, swallowing the open land that had once cradled freedom. This was no longer a village. It was a complex urban system, requiring coordination, labor management, food storage, and authority. The intoxicating thrill of building something eternal, shadowed by the chains it forged. For the first time in human history, tens of thousands lived side by side, close enough to touch, yet divided by unseen lines of power. And such density demanded structure that promised security, yet exacted its price in obedience. Rainfall was unreliable. To sustain growing populations, communities expanded irrigation networks, canals branching from the rivers, directing water toward distant fields, bending nature itself to human timetables. These systems required planning, maintenance, cooperation, or coercion. Managing water meant managing labor, and managing labor required record-keeping, oversight, and authority. The moment when freedom of movement yielded to the ledger and the overseer's gaze. Out of this need emerged administrative elites, rising above the rest, not by strength alone, but by holding the keys to survival. Political power did not begin with armies. It began with management, a subtler, more enduring conquest. Control the irrigation. Control the harvest. Control the stability of the city itself, and with it, the lives within. Each city was tied to a patron deity. The temple stood at its center, not only as sacred space, but as an economic engine, where divine will and human ambition intertwined. Temples owned land, employed laborers, distributed grain, organized production, sanctuaries of awe, yet engines of extraction. Priests and administrators worked side by side. Religion and economy were not separate. They were intertwined, binding the soul as surely as the body. Over time, secular rulers, known as lugals, or big men, emerged alongside temple authorities. Kingship would develop more fully in centuries ahead. But the foundation of centralized authority was already being laid. A new order where the many toiled for the few, under the watchful eyes of gods and men. As cities expanded, memory was no longer enough. The spoken word faded too quickly amid the clamor of thousands. Around 3200 BC in Uruk, administrators pressed simple symbols into wet clay tablets. This early script, proto-cuneiform, recorded grain deliveries, livestock counts, labor assignments. The first scratches that captured not just things, but lives. It was practical, administrative, economic, but the implications were profound. Information could now survive beyond the lifetime of the speaker, and so could commands, debts, and inequalities. Civilization first wrote down numbers, not stories. First tallied obligations, not dreams. Society grew increasingly stratified. At the top, rulers and high officials. Alongside them, temple administrators and priests. Below, scribes, merchants, skilled craftsmen. And at the foundation, farmers, laborers, bearing the weight of granaries and canals, yet rarely tasting the fruits of their excess. Urban life produced structured inequality, a glittering pyramid built on the bent backs of those who once walked free. And structured inequality required laws, enforcement, authority, the soft tyranny of the written rule over the wild equality of the open plain. Mesopotamia had achieved something unprecedented: large-scale urban life, administrative government, institutional religion, writing. But the plains between the rivers had no natural borders. Cities rose close to one another. They competed for water, for farmland, for trade routes. Rivalry hardened into conflict. Kings emerged not just as managers, but as war leaders, trading the shepherd's staff for the sword. The experiment of the city entered a new phase. The age of city-states had begun, and with it, the age of war, where the dream of permanence revealed its darkest cost. Not just the end of wandering,